All right. Oh my goodness, guys. We are out here today. I am here with Brian Pirtle. He is an amazing gardener for how many years?
30?
Okay. 30 years. So we have lots that we can learn from Brian, and that is exactly what we're going to do today. So, Brian, before we get started, can you kind of go over maybe a couple tips on the benefits of gardening as opposed to just shopping?
Gardening has so many benefits health-wise
Yeah.
as well as just benefits for the family and the environment itself. So when you're making your own vegetables, they taste better. And
Yes.
I think it brings some character to your food, and you know where it comes from. You know what's been
true.
done to it. You know what's been, if it's been sprayed or anything, what it's been fertilized with as well.
Yeah.
And it's also physically good for you.
That's
It
actually
increases,
true.
it burns calories because you're going up and going down. You're lifting things. You're shoveling.
Yeah.
It increases your flexibility, your strength. And it's just all around good for you as far as health-wise. And for me, it's great for my mental health. I love getting out in the garden. It's calming, and I just love being out there with the plants. It gives you a sense of accomplishment when you take this seed and you end up with this beautiful tomato plant or vegetables that you harvest, and then you're feeding it to your family and keeping your family healthy.
Wow, tons of benefits then.
Tons.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get started.
Also, as far as the environment's concerned, you're not shipping the produce across town using gasoline. You're not warehousing it somewhere. And so it's really good for the environment to have it right close and right next to you.
Oh, wow. So really empowering stuff in ways that we can not only achieve those benefits that you were just talking about, but also so into bettering our environment too. So, okay.
That's right.
So I am such a beginner at this, and thank goodness we have Brian, who has all the experience in the world. And so I'm just going to be asking you a bunch of questions on just the basics as we get into it. So we have a couple tools over here.
Yeah.
What are some of our basic gardening tools?
And I recommend getting good tools. You know, it's a little extra money to get a better tool, but I think in the long run it really helps out to have good quality tools.
Okay.
It's a good idea to have a good hose.
Oh,
And
okay.
you know, so many times I've been in the garden with a cheap hose and you're watering and all of a sudden your hose is kinking up, and then so you have to stop and you have to go and kink it. So get a good hose that doesn't kink. This hose here was probably about $30, but it really does pay off in the long run. It has a nice brass shutoff valve, so when you stop watering, you can just shut it off instead of going all the way back to the faucet.
Oh, okay.
And this is called a water breaker, so the water doesn't come out and splash the dirt all around. It breaks up the water when you're watering.
What kind of hose is that? Like, what would you look for?
I just get a no kink hose, and
and that's what it's called.
Yeah, this is called a no kink hose. And shovels. I usually have several different shovels. I call this a spade, and I use it for digging up the dirt. But I also have a smaller shovel. This is really good for getting in and out of the vegetables when you have a lot of stuff growing in your tight quarters.
Okay.
And then I have a very small shovel, and this is good for planting your plants and things like that. It's also
Look at
good
how
for
cool
a weeder.
and funky. Oh my gosh.
You
Okay.
can get the weeds out with this, and if you have a big weed, you can even chop through it because it's serrated. Now, you also want a good rake. This is good for raking the soil, raking around the mulch.
Okay.
A good weeder. I like a hand weeder, so you can get in there, and then if you don't want to bend over as much, this is a hoe on one side and a weeder on the other side.
Wow, and you can get all of these at like your local warehouse, hardware store.
Usually the hardware store, or sometimes the garden center will sell them. A good wheelbarrow is important. I always like to have a good wheelbarrow. Again, that's something that I don't want to skimp on. This wheelbarrow is very stable. It doesn't fall over when you put stuff in it, and so that's always a good idea to spend some money on a good wheelbarrow. Now these are some things that I like to have on hand. A tape measure, because I like to measure out my garden and plot out my garden, and then also measure in between the plants. And so I might want to put my tomatoes 3 feet apart. I might want to put my squash 2 feet apart. So I always have a tape measure on hand so I can figure out where I'm going with everything. Some twine. I'll stake out a stake on one side, a stake on the other, run the twine so I get everything in a straight line. I'm kind of anal.
A little OC,
like that,
a little
yeah.
OC. But is that really important though to have like
Yeah,
the better
I think
spacing?
it
I
can
guess.
serve space because
Okay.
if you have them all zigzag, then you put your next row in, and then you almost have to zigzag that row. And then by the time you get to the end, then you have just this whole mess. So then next, and when it's in a nice straight line, when you come through to weed and do things like that, it's very easy to get in there. It's very easy to walk up and down your rows.
Okay.
So I think a straight line is pretty important.
Okay.
Gardening gloves.
Aha.
Pruners to harvest your vegetables, trim
what
off
does that
your...
look like? Just like oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
kind of like a scissors, and a good heavy-duty scissors would work the same.
Okay.
And then knee pads. These are very good to have.
Not something I would have thought of at all.
Saves your knees. And saves your pants that you're wearing when you're out in the garden.
That makes sense.
And also the bucket that all this is in. I use this. I'll turn it over. I'll sit on it. I'll also, when I pull weeds, I'll put them in the bucket. Yeah. And so having a good bucket's a good idea. And then sometimes having a really big bucket. Sometimes.
What would you use that for?
I will take that with me and I'll sit on this one, and this will sit next to me. And as I pull the weeds, I'll throw them in this big bucket, and I'll just move on down the line.
Wow, some pretty cool tips. I probably would have just bought the gloves and maybe a shovel. So this is cool. Okay, so we have those tools, and now we're starting from scratch. Like what would be
some gardening basics. First of all, your vegetables are going to want at least 6 hours of sun a day, and preferably more. This garden here is in full sun all day long. That's ideal. But if you have some trees around, you need at least 6 hours, preferably afternoon sun, and that's going to be very important. The soil is important. I like to amend my soil. I will amend my soil with some good compost. Ooh. This is composted pine bark. You can buy all different types of composted cotton, composted alfalfa, or you can make your own compost. And that's a whole nother episode. We'll do that some other time, making compost. But compost is very good. What it does is it enriches the soil. It helps hold moisture. It helps promote drainage. It also adds organic material to the soil. So you would mix this compost in here about 30 to 40% into your existing soil, and every year you would add more compost, and every year the soil will get better and better.
How do you know how much compost to add?
You almost can't overdo it. You can go up to 50-60% compost, and but somewhere between 30 to 50-60% is going to be just fine.
And is all compost made equal? Like, what would you recommend? Like, if I was going into the store to buy compost?
Ideally, homemade compost is the best, but that takes a long time. That'll take 3 to 6 months to make your own compost. Yeah. So if you're going into the store, there's a product called Back to Earth and Back to Nature. They're composted cotton. Okay. This is just composted pine bark. So really, most composts are going to be okay. I guess my absolute favorite would be composted alfalfa. And it's a really, really fine textured compost and really, really good compost.
Okay.